Alright, so what we're going to be working on to start with is the second half of what we were going to do yesterday. And we are still solving polynomials. We're still solving polynomials. Hey, hush. We're getting started. Here, shush. We are going to do what's called factoring by grouping. And you guys did this when you were freshmen, so hopefully you remember, but if not, we're going to go over it. And real quick, I forgot to put this equals 0. I made this. I copied it from the book and I forgot that part. So we're going to do factoring by grouping. So, factor by grouping, we use this when we have 4 terms. If we have 4 terms, we can factor by grouping. So, when I did quadratic and everything, we only had 3 terms. That was what we did yesterday. On the first part of today's, if we have 4 terms, we're going to do this factor by grouping. And to do that, I'm going to make sure it's in standard form, so biggest exponent, and then go down. So 3, then 2, there's a 1 there, no, not writing it, and then nothing. And what we're going to do is we're going to put parentheses around the first 2, and parentheses around the second 2, and we're going to say, or we're going to factor out the greatest common factor from each parenthesis. So I'm going to look at this first parenthesis. What's the biggest thing I can take out of x to the third and 3x squared? X squared, right? So I'm going to factor out an x squared from this parenthesis. I'm going to put it out in front here. Alright, let's look at the second one. What can I take out of a 4x and a 12?
4.
We can take out a 2, but we want the biggest number.
4.
GCF is greatest common factor. So 2 works, but 4 is bigger. So take out the biggest number. So we're going to take a 4 out. We're going to factor it out there. And then on the inside, it's kind of like dividing. So I took out this x squared, right? And then what I have left inside, x to the third over x squared is just x, plus 3x squared over x squared. X squared cancels out, and I just got a 3. I took a 4 out of the second parenthesis. And I've got a 4x over 4 is just x, plus 12 over 4 is 3. I factored that out, so I got a 0. I thought equals 0 at the end. Alright, so we found our greatest common factor, and we're taking it out of the parentheses. What we're going to do, you see how we have an x plus 3, and then another x plus 3?
Yeah.
We are going to factor out this x plus 3. So it's like we're factoring a second time. Or, because that confuses people, basically what I'm going to do is my answer is going to have 2 parentheses. In my first parenthesis, I am going to just take this stuff on the outside that I factored out, x squared and 4. The order actually doesn't matter, but this is the order I do it, so I try to be consistent. I'm going to take out the x squared and the 4. I'm going to put them in inside my first parenthesis. I'm going to go x squared, and because that's positive, I'm going to go plus 4. My second parenthesis is just one of these x plus 3s. It doesn't matter which one, they're exactly the same, so I'm going to go x plus 3. My first parenthesis was this outside piece. My second parenthesis was the inside piece. So now that I have this, I've got x squared plus 4. I have an x plus 3, and it equals 0. Now that I have this, I'm going to solve both parentheses like we've been doing before, because my final answer is going to be an x equals something. So I'm going to look at both parentheses and say, what can I put in for x to make these both 0? So let's start with our easy one. What can I put in for x right here to make x plus 3 0? Negative 3, right? That's my first answer. Alright, let's look at our second parenthesis. This one's going to be a little tougher. So I have x squared plus 4, and I want to make that equal 0. What do I got to do if I'm going to solve this for x? We're going to subtract 4 first. So let me back up a little bit. Pull down. There we go. We're going to minus 4 on both sides. And I get x squared equals negative 4. How do I get rid of this power of 2?
Square root.
Square root. We are going to square root this. I'm going to go square root. If I square root the left, I got to square root the right. These are opposites of each other. I think it's our next chapter. We will actually do a whole chapter about square roots and stuff. But I square root this, I get an x, and then it's going to equal 2. Can I square root
No.
Negative? No.
I.
So what do I do here with the a?
Imaginary.
Yeah, we're going to have our imaginary and then square root of 4. Which is, what is the square root of 4?
2.
2. So I'm really going to have 2i, right? Because square root of 4 is 2, square root of the negative is I. And we haven't really talked about this before, but whenever you put in a square root yourself, like I put in this square root right here, I actually have two answers. I have a positive version and the negative version. We're actually going to do a whole chapter on this later, this kind of stuff. But for right now, when you put in a square root yourself, you draw yourself, you actually have two answers, the positive and the negative. So my first answer, I had x equaled negative 3. I got that from this one. My second answer is a plus minus 2i. One is the positive, one's the negative version. Those are my three answers. So factor by grouping, you make your parentheses, you factor out your stuff, you get your two parenthesis answers, and then you set them equal to 0. So, same steps as these next ones. We're going to practice one, then you guys can do one.
What?
Go down.
We're going to practice one more, then you guys can do it.
Oh.
Alright, so we're going to factor by grouping on this next problem here.
2i and positive 2i.
Oh.
So, I have 4 terms, so I know it's a factor by grouping problem. I'm going to put parentheses around the first 2, parentheses around the second 2, and I'm going to take out my greatest common factor. So what's the biggest thing I can take out of 3x3 and 6x squared?
3x squared.
3x squared. So I'm taking out a 3x squared from both of them. And my biggest thing on this one is 4. So that was our first thing. Put your parentheses and then see what your greatest common factor is. So I'm taking out a 3x squared. And I have an x left. And I got a plus 2 left. I'm taking out a 4. I have an x and then a plus 2 left. And it's equal 0. Okay? So my final answer is going to have 2 parentheses, or my final factor part. My final answer is going to be an x equals. It's going to have 2 parentheses. In the first one, I take out this beginning pieces, 3x squared plus 4. And my second one, it's just an x plus 2. And now is where I get my final answers. What can I put in each parenthesis to make it equal 0? So, let's start with the easy one, because it's going to be x equals something. What can I put in this parenthesis right here?
Negative 2.
Negative 2. That one's easy. My first parenthesis, though, that's a little tougher. I'm going to have to actually go through and solve that. So I go 3x squared plus 4 equals 0. Get a little more space here, maybe. Alright, if I'm going to solve this, actually, let's go around. James, what's the first thing I should do to solve this one?
What?
Right here.
Minus 4.
Yep, we're going to minus 4 on both sides. We're going to get 3x squared equals negative 4. Alright, let's keep going. Thomas, what should I do next?
Oh, what does it say? 3x squared.
Equals negative 4.
Oh.
Equals. Totally in English. What are we doing?
Yeah. That. You know what I'm trying to
Draw
say.
it in the air. Let's go. Square root.
Yeah. Square root.
Close. We are going to square root at the very end. So we're actually going to divide by 3 first. And we're going to get x squared equals, we have negative 4 over 3, which is negative 1.3 repeated. You can plug that to Desmos. I believe that's what you keep. Okay, now that we're down to just the squared, now we can square root it. So square root,
You did it?
square root.
Good.
So I'm going to get x equals, I'm going to put my plus minus in, and we're going to get imaginary, right? Because we got the negative. So I'm going to go I, and do you know what the square root of 1.3 is? Is it a nice number? No. It's going to be crazy decimals. So I'm just going to leave it as square root of 1.3. That's fine. So x plus minus, because when I put the square root myself, I drew that square root in myself, I'm always going to have a plus and a minus. And then square root of negative 1.3, I mean, square root of negative is I, and 1.3 is not worth writing out as anything other than like this, because it's going to be a crazy decimal.
This is just the first
So I'm
part.
going to go plus minus I, square root of
Let me know what you get.
1.3, my final answer. Point.
Would you divide?
That's 1.3 up there. That's terrible.
4x.
Alright,
4x.
you guys ready to try one on your own?
Hold on, don't go yet.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one thing, I forgot to make this equal 0 again.
That's fun. We can figure out your
What comes after?
faults.
What?
X equals -2, then what?
And plus minus this piece right here.
What's that little line thing?
It's, let me try it again. I just wrote it badly, so I tried to cross it out. And then plus minus I square root of 1. Alright. Let's have you guys, let's take this one a piece at a time.
Yeah.
So if you think you're doing good, and you can do the whole thing, just do the whole thing. But on this one, let's take it a piece at a time. So the first part, on your own, I want you to do, let's do the factor part. Factor what you can from the parentheses. So do that part on your own. And then we'll make sure we're right on that part, and then we will do the next part. So factor out what you can, and get your 2 parentheses equals 0.
Negative. What?
Oh, okay. Let's do this now.
What's the square root of 1.5?
Oh, I didn't do that. I just left it.
You just left it?
Yeah, because he said you could. Okay. We got 2 and then I plus minus whatever.
But it's not negative.
Oh, then, I don't know. And leave it. It'd be like 1.3, something.
I don't know.
Plus. Biggest number is 4.
Why is it minus 6?
Because that's minus 12.
But
What do we do with this? That is right?
But that's not the answer.
I got the answer.
It'd just be 6. So it'd be plus.
6 divided by 4, yeah. So plus minus that. Square root of 1.5. So no.
Plus minus square root of 1.5.
Because whenever you draw a square root yourself, like you drew that square root in because it wasn't part of the problem, right? You always have a plus minus. We'll talk about that more in another chapter. Right now, whenever you draw the square root yourself, and it wasn't part of the problem originally, you put it in
What's
yourself.
that?
I don't know. Walmart.
Huh?
It's not very expensive. Doesn't feel good. Like Tommy's pencil. I mean pen.
Yeah, because that's a negative.
Whatever I can do it.
I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea.
Stole it back.
What the? Why are those 3 dots together?
You got long.
I'd rather be in my corner.
You got a minus.
Never do. Lean on. Die. I mean, sleep really quick.
Sleep forever. I mean,
Yeah, what? No?
Okay.
Dude, stop.
Alright, get your 2 parentheses.
Yeah, I got 2.
Okay, so it equals 0. And then minus 6, okay, then divide that. And you're gonna get a decimal.
You always divide by 4.
You always do the divide and then
What were
square
you
root
saying?
at the very end.
It would just be 6?
yeah.
So you always divide
Where?
by this number.
Yeah.
So when you divide that out, it's just be 6.
Alright, most people are getting a good start on this, so let's make sure you guys got the first part right. Give me a second.
Yeah, it's plus.
So it would be. Yeah, so I did do that.
Yeah. I don't think Goki noticed.
He did
4x
it.
squared and then 6, right?
So,
So that's what you're gonna put together.
negative.
So we're looking at it right now. I think you maybe missed a negative in there.
Yeah, yeah, so
Yeah.
just like.
Well, no, we added a negative.
Alright, so let's go through and look at this, and I think we're on, Austin, what am I taking out of this first parenthesis?
The 4
And,
x squared.
yep, 4x squared, 4x squared. Dazen, what am I gonna take out of this second one?
6.
Yep, we take out a 6. Take that out there. Alright, so I got a 4x squared.
I 1.
LMA, what do I have after I take this out inside this first parenthesis?
What's the square root of negative 1?
X minus 2.
That's
Okay,
no.
and then I'm taking out a 6 from the second one. Alyssa, what do I have left after I
What's
take
that
out the
4
6?
plus
Alright, so it equals 0. Alright, so I have to get 2 parentheses in here. And then, Ermaya, what am I putting in this first parenthesis?
Oh, I just forgot to put the stupid
4x.
square root thing.
4x squared plus 6. And then in the second parenthesis?
X minus 2.
Alright, so we get 4x squared plus 6, x minus 2. Most people, if they didn't get this, they just missed something little. It wasn't a big deal.
Negative.
Okay, now this is where it gets a little tougher. We gotta get our 2 answer. So I can get 1 easy. I'm gonna go x equals, Raven, what can I put in the second parenthesis here to make the whole thing 0?
0.
In the x minus 2.
Positive 2.
Yep, positive 2. That's my first answer. That was the easy one. Alright, and then for this second one, this I have to set up to be 4x squared plus 6 equals 0. Solve it for x. So if you haven't yet, I want you to start to solve this one, and then we'll double check our answers in a minute. So if you haven't started to solve it, get started on that. I'll give you a little bit of time. So you can go from there. You're probably going to end up making this lesson 3 days. 1 more day for this one. Yeah.
Is that water? No.
We have like 2 problem assignments.
What, no assignment?
Yeah. We shouldn't have an assignment until we're done with it.
No,
I like this pen. It's like a fine tip.
What, Jason? What were you saying?
We shouldn't have an assignment until we're done understanding everything.
If we don't practice, you're just going to forget it.
Oh yeah. We should have 4 problem assignments.
Loki, I don't get how my career has to have this.
Yeah, lots of practice days.
That's not my career though. I'll just do writing.
I want to be a, you know those people that work at our schools and they hold the stop sign so kids can cross?
I don't think that'd be a good full-time job.
Nah,
I don't think
I
that
You'd be out there
beg
for
to
like
differ.
half an hour.
That's okay.
And then you'd be done. And you go outside for half an hour. That's not really a job. They usually make like other teachers do that.
Volunteer.
But
I'd probably end up letting the kids cross when the bus is coming. Wait! Oh, no, they're dead already.
When you order, just square part left now.
but the light's green.
Yeah.
It's okay, go.
That's terrible.
I know.
So minus
So funny.
It's my snake now.
Snip. Okay, we should just stop here.
Minus and 6 on the left.
Smoking good headaches.
Minus 6 on the right.
What? Ash, what was the highest I got to? Like 50?
63 or something like that.
What? I wasn't care. I don't want to school.
Did it divide first?
No.
Did it? There's a time between there, even though it's so you're going to divide by 4, it's going to be decimal.
I hate it
Yeah,
when I
it's
see stuff.
negative.
Well, I mean, it's like almost falling out.
So x squared.
Why?
Cause I have a headache. So I just ding, 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 ding.
I think you're dying.
I think I'm having a stroke.
This is an x squared right
Oh.
I haven't played Overwatch in forever.
Wait, what?
Overwatch. I haven't played any games really. Just rules of survival and fun.
Dude, I tried playing Fortnite last night.
there. Peter solved
My dad didn't even turn it off.
So now minus the 6.
It's past Clem's bedtime.
Because I haven't been waking up early.
Divide 1 by 4.
I haven't been waking up on time.
So you get an x squared, right?
I don't sleep.
Negative
Sleeping
6
is
what? Equals
I mean,
I said sometimes I don't even sleep.
you just go home and play games all night.
No. So nothing, just lay in bed, just stay there.
How? Why are you asleep?
Sometimes I don't. I have a sleep problem.
We stuck on something, James?
You suck.
I don't even care anymore.
Did I hear that much?
I'll be back in this
I
class.
did?
Or except,
You get the same credit.
divided by
You should
4,
not get it. It was boring.
you're dividing by 4.
What? They blocked it. God dang it, Wilkie.
What?
Talk to them about blocking cool man.
Who blocked cool
Yeah.
man?
Alright, let's go through and start to solve this one. Most people are done or getting close, so Carissa, start us off. What's the first thing we do? We're -6 on both sides.
I was messing around with the settings in my desktop. and I was gonna
We
get
got
too many.
4
I don't know
x
how to.
squared
I forgot what to do with the square root thing. I don't know where to put that in here.
at the like very last step.
It
Very
is?
last step. Alright, we get 4x squared equals -6. Jaden, what are we doing next?
Where are we at?
Right here, 4x squared equals -6.
You're gonna divide by 4.
We are gonna divide by 4 on both sides. And we're gonna get x squared equals -1.5.
Yeah, and then you're gonna square root it.
And then, now that we have everything else, now we're gonna square root. Yeah, listen.
Oh.
Your question?
Yes,
Nice.
sir.
So plus minus.
Alright. So we're gonna get x equals, because I drew in the square root, it wasn't part of my original problem, I'm gonna get plus minus. And then, Helena, what do I have to do with this -1.5 inside my square root? Like, what do I get after I square root that?
Oh, you gotta do that I thing.
Yep. And then, do we know what the square root of of 1.5 is?
No, we do
No.
not.
So let's just leave it, because that's not gonna be a nice number. It's gonna be a bunch of annoying decimals. So let's leave it like that. That will be our most accurate answer. So those are our other answers. Plus minus I square root 1.5. Okay. We're gonna do one more type of problem, I think, and then we're gonna practice these two. I'm gonna do the third thing tomorrow. We probably won't have a full lesson tomorrow, so you'll have extra time to finish off homework.
Yes.
I might just do
So
a
we've been doing
homework
over these 3 lessons.
I need it.
So I think I'm gonna do it.
We should do a quiz Thursday.
This last one, this last thing we're doing, you guys, I don't think I've ever seen anything like this before, so this should be completely new. So, another way we can factor and then solve different things is by doing what's called the difference of squares. So, we use this when we have 2 terms, and when we have subtraction in the middle, and we can write exponents as 2. So we got a few requirements. We have to have 2 terms. So if I'm going to solve this problem, I got 1 and 2. And then I have to have a subtraction in the middle. So I got a subtraction right there. And I need to be able to write both things with an exponent of 2. Which we can do on this, but we're going to have to do some finagling. So the difference of squares, if I have a squared minus b squared, the way I factor that is it is the exact same thing as in parentheses a plus b, and in the second parentheses a minus b. So this is how we can factor it, and then after we factor, we can solve.
Finagle.
So we're going to have to do some finagling in here, because if I'm looking at this problem right here, is 4x squared a squared?
It's the name of David.
No.
Devious, which is.
And 15 is not a b squared. So here's how I'm going to
I don't
finagle
think
it.
so.
I want to take this 4x squared right here,
Oh well, I'm gonna have the chance.
and I want it to make it look like
I we're moved way over again.
I'm going to make this into an a squared. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange this 4 and this x squared to be something inside parentheses squared. So I'm going to rearrange this to be something inside parentheses squared. And whatever is inside this parenthesis right here, I'm going to call a. So let's look. Is there a way I can change 4 to be something squared?
2 squared?
2 squared is 4, right? I'm going to change 4 into a 2 squared. And x squared is already something squared, right?
No.
Yes, it's an x squared.
What's 1 squared?
Okay,
What the heck?
so I changed 4 into a 2 squared. I changed x squared, or I didn't change x squared because it's already a square.
X squared.
So, if I have an exponent 2, you guys did this back when you were freshmen, so kind of some refreshers.
2x to the 4th.
That was like the last thing we did.
Yeah, it was one of the last things we did. Right, sorry, let me get some more space. I know people can't see. Okay, I changed 4 into a 2 squared. I didn't change x because it already had a squared. Because these both have an exponent of 2, right? I can put a 2 inside parentheses and an x inside parentheses. And I can put my squared outside the parentheses. Because we did this freshman year, we like backwards distribute, and we go 2 squared is 4, x squared is, or, yeah,
X squared.
Okay, so I found something in parentheses squared. I'm going to call this piece in the middle, I'm going to say, well, that's my a. And let me go back up here to my formula. Everywhere I see an a, I'm going to replace it with 2x. Everywhere I see an a, I'm going to replace it with 2x. So I found my a equaled 2x. I need to do the same thing, but this time, my b I'm going to get from this 15. I need to change 15 to be something in parentheses squared.
To be.
Alright, and this one's a little weird. Can I split up 15 to be something to the power of 2?
No.
No, but yes. And this is it. It's kind of cheesy, I think. But alright. So, this still has to equal 15, right? What if I did square root of 15? What happens with square root of 15 squared? What does that equal?
15.
15, right? Because the square root and the squared are opposites, they cancel out, and I just got 15 left. So I'm going to say b is the square root of 15.
So what is finagling? It's pretty devious.
Kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's whack.
Yeah. There aren't very many like this, but I
I
wanted
like
to show you
cheese.
one. So everywhere I see a b, I'm going to put in the square root of 15. So my b is going to equal square root of 15. So I've got a, I've got b, I have to finagle it around. So my a is a 2x, b is square root of 15. I'm going to replace a and b up here with the a and b that I found down here. So I'm going to have 2x up here for a, and then plus 15, and then 2x, and then minus 15. And you know what? I think I'm going to make this a little simpler. We're just going to factor, we're not going to solve.
Just ends like that.
Well, we have to actually put it in.
But
So, yeah, we're going to write the equation, but we're not going to solve it. I'll make it a little easier because I want you guys to practice this. So, my a I found was 2x. So instead of parentheses a plus b, I'm going to go parentheses 2x plus, and instead of b, I'm going to put in the square root of 15. And second parenthesis, instead of an a, I'm going to put 2x again. And then this time minus, and instead of b, square root of 15.
wait, you can't just put 15.
Nope, because b is the square root of 15. Because I had to change this 15 to be something
Yeah, I
inside
know
parentheses
that.
to a power of 2.
But I
That's
thought
how
it
changed
canceled out.
Yeah. So I still want it to equal 15, but I want to finagle it so I have an exponent of 2. So
Do you know what finagle means, Goki?
What?
You know what finagle means?
Move it around? I don't know. Math, not English.
That's devious. Devious.
Whatever works. So we're getting into math. You can't just memorize a formula. You really got to
Yeah,
be
you can.
imaginative now. As much as people say math is really concrete, you got to get some imagination in here. So a lot of this, it's kind of hard to.
Like imaginary.
Yeah.
Hey, Larissa.
After lesson.
Is it over yet?
All right. So we're gonna practice this a little more because it's kind of weird. So I'm gonna look at x squared, or excuse me, x to the 4 equals 16. So you guys can look back at
Well,
your
He's
notes.
simplifying it.
I forgot though, the very first thing you gotta do is make it equal 0. But that's how, like, every one of these is. Does this equal 0? No. So what do I gotta do to make it equal 0?
Minus 16.
Minus 16
That's
on
how
both sides.
dyslexic I am. I just wrote 4x instead of x squared.
Okay.
4. What?
So I have x to the 4 minus 16 equals 0. And instead of solving like we were doing, we are just gonna factor. We might keep solving later, but for now we're going to factor.
Fact or each.
All right, so I have two terms, and I am going to write this out as I'm going to use my difference of squares. So I need to get, my first step now is get A and get B.
Oh, yeah.
So A is going to be from my x to the 4. And I want to rewrite x to the 4 to be something in parentheses squared. So if I want something in parentheses squared, I can split this up. Because what is x squared to the power 2?
X
X
squared,
squared.
X.
X squared and then squared?
Yeah.
You think back to when you were a freshman,
Use Adam, right?
you multiply them when they're outside parentheses. X squared squared is x to the, that's terrible, but x to the 2 times 2, which is x to the 4. So I split this up to be an x squared squared. So this x squared right here is going to be my a. That's going to go in for my a, my difference of squares. For my b, I get this from 16. And I want to split up 16 to be something inside parentheses squared. How can I rewrite 16 to be something squared?
Square root of 16 squared.
4.
Which is 4.
James, you're overthinking it.
You were right. You were right, James. Oh, well, he's right. He was thinking back to what we did before. But
Yeah.
the square root of 16 is actually a nice number. It's 4.
Oh.
So we're going to rewrite 16 as 4 and then parentheses squared,
That's nice.
which means my b is going to be 4.
Well, guaranteed.
So, my sum or difference of squares, I'm just going to rewrite it so I can see it. It is a plus b, a minus b. Everywhere I see an a, I'm going to replace it with x squared. Everywhere I see a b, I'm going to replace it with 4. So when I factor, I'm going to have x squared instead of a, plus 4 instead of b. And then same thing, x squared instead of a, minus this time 4. So we factored this using our sum of differences.
That's the answer?
So that will be it for this.
Yeah.
Normally what you would do is you'd have to say what can you do for each of these to make it equal 0, but I'm just going to practice the sum or difference of squares first. Alright. I want you guys to, let's break it up into pieces before. So, we're going to do our difference of squares. I need to figure out what I can do to 9x squared
Wait a minute.
to make it something in parentheses squared. So I want you to work on just that part right now. Just that part.
Okay.
So, figure out, how can you make a 9x squared something inside parentheses and then squared? And I'll give you a hint, if you can rewrite 9 to be something squared,
9 squared.
you can know
3
it.
squared, x squared.
Okay? You're on, you're on? Keep going.
And then put it in there.
Yeah. Or close to it.
And then
So try it on your own first. I want you to try it on your own. Let's see how you remember it. Then we'll go over it. Because this is hard stuff. You guys have never done anything this hard in math. I don't think.
3x squared.
Except for matrices.
You
But
just said that
Those weren't
Hey,
hard,
that's
that
right.
was
I'm not
annoying.
gonna sugarcoat it. This is tough.
Hey,
sugarcoat it.
I forgot what we're doing.
Maybe 3x squared.
That's good, right?
Oh, yeah,
But what about-
right.
Got the x squared, right?
yeah, 3x.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll give you a couple of
What are we
minutes.
doing?
Then we will go over it. And then if you're done and you're feeling pretty good about it, you could say, you
24
could try to figure out what b is.
Is
How do
it,
we do this?
is it the square root of 24?
If you're done already, you can try to figure out what b is if you want.
I don't know how to do it.
No, well, this is what I'm going to do with it.
Especially
Square
if
root
you
of
got it.
24. Square.
That is confusing. What's that? I can't read.
And this is
Yeah,
the
let
answer.
Raven go to the bathroom before me.
I think I should go to the hospital.
You asked before you, you would go before you.
Snapchat.
Ha! Told you, James.
No, I don't think Boki remembered.
I really don't. When you asked me at the beginning of class, I I don't even try. Like, yeah, sure, whatever. Just quit asking me. Okay, let's look at this first one. How can we rewrite, because we want to rewrite this 9 to be something squared, and we want to rewrite the x to be something squared if we need to, but... Alright, how can we rewrite this 9 to be something squared?
3.
3 squared, right?
Numbers and letters.
And it's already an x squared, so I can put 3 and I can put x on the inside.
Math.
Cool.
So I put a 3 and I put an x. That makes 3x my A piece. Yep. So we also need to find B, which I need to figure out what can I do to 24 to put something inside parentheses to make it something square. So take a minute or two, work on that. I'll give you a hint. This one's kind of cheesy.
Cheesiness. I know.
Some cheesy chili. Oh, that was so good.
Chili cheese. Chips. Fritos.
No, just chili with cheese.
Frito chili.
No, I mean just chili
Alright,
with
Yeah,
now
cheese.
fill in your A and B
And
inside
fried
your
bread.
equation.
Oh,
Ooh.
yeah, I made that for dinner.
This was the actual thing we filled in, right? So put in 3x for A, put in your square root of 24 for B.
Good job.
Alright, it looks like a lot of people are done with this one already.
I didn't even
So-
do it.
Well then, talk to with me. Can we rewrite 24 as something squared?
Yeah.
Yes.
4 squared isn't 24.
Force-
Alright, so you got Desmos on there, Maya?
It's dirty.
You got Desmos on your screen right there? What's the square root of 24?
4.9.
I'm asking her, Maya. Alright, can we, is that a nice number?
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
No. So let's be a little cheesy
All
here
numbers are
I
beautiful.
used to do square
and say
Six.
square root of 24.
I asked you that, but you just said
Alright, square root of 24 is our B.
That's it?
And we just have to fill in A and B in our formula. So the formula was, just because I can't see it,
Sum of differences.
A plus
A
B,
I don't like the way that looks.
A minus B. We just have to replace, everywhere we see an A, we're going to replace it with 3x.
So 3x
Everywhere we
plus
see a B, replace it with square root of 24. So 3x plus square root of 24. And then 3x minus 24. And then that's it, because I'm just going to have you guys practice factoring today. We're not going to solve it.
Cool.
Let's go.
Alright. So let me skip ahead here. We're going to do an exit ticket, but I'm going to skip ahead and find you an exit ticket.
Thank you.
Oh.
That one.
It's time to drop out. I'm tired of this.
Alright, let me make up something here for your exit ticket. It is going to be...
If I gotta change on ours.
No, we haven't learned that one yet. That's the difference of cubes, which we didn't learn.
Well then.
Let's do
Just make it 2.
25
No,
x
broken.
4
Make it easy.
minus 1.
What the?
That's probably one of the hardest things to ever do, or Maya.
Probably. Alright, so for your exit ticket, I want you to factor this using the difference of squares. So, I just made this problem up, so somewhere like on the back of your paper, just write it down. I will turn on Socrative for you to answer, and your homework is going to look a little weird because I'm going to have to kind of pick and choose. So give me a few minutes for that one.
Four problems, please.